Music theory with Microsoft Excel. Modal chords with dropped notes. In other words, build in chords that have a greater distance from the root to the last note in the chord stack, but also wanting to be more specific about notes that we're dropping in between that distance in the normal chord construction, comparing and contrasting the traditional chord naming convention, which is quite ugly with regards to this issue, to a more streamlined modal chord naming system, focusing this time on the major chords built off the major nodes, that being the Ionian node, the Lydian node, and the Mixolydian node, part number 1. So get ready and some coffee, because you ain't never seen rockin' unless you excel at rockin', and you need spreadsheets for that, people. You need spreadsheets. They don't tell you this. They try to actually hide it from you in the music schools, but you need. Here we are in Excel. If you don't have access to this workbook, that's okay, because we basically built this from a blank worksheet, but started in a prior presentation. So if you want to build this entire worksheet from a blank sheet, you could begin back there, or just follow along, possibly building the part of the worksheet that we're currently working on. If you do have access to this workbook, though, 4 tabs down below, including a very colorful fretboard tab we may refer to, the example tab, in essence the answer key, practice tab having a pre-formatted cells so you can practice the practice problem with less Excel formatting. But if you don't have any of that, that's okay, because we'll continue to work in the blank tab where we started in a prior course or section with a blank worksheet, and we'll be continuing in essence in the blank part of the worksheet, or at least practicing not only our music skills but our Excel formatting skills as well, for formatting's sake. So in a prior course or section, we built this worksheet, which is mapping out the general chord constructions based off of the nodal points in a standard 7-note collection, noting that usually, if you look this information up, you'll get a table that might look something more like this, which will give you the standard extensions that are broken out into a bunch of different buckets. That's not actually useful for an actual playing standpoint, because it doesn't tell you which of these chord types that you want to be building off of each of the nodal points in a standard 7-note collection. So it would be nicer if you broke this table out into something like this. If you build off of the Ionian node, you'll be in the major bucket. Lydian node, you'll have 3 that are in the major bucket, and then you've got to shift up to the minor bucket when you add the 6th and 7th notes, because it deviates. The Mixolydian node, you got 1 in the major bucket, and as soon as you get to the 7th, they have a whole different bucket, which is going to be the dominant 7 bucket. And then the Aeolian, you would think, would all be in the minor bucket, but no, when you add the 7th note, you got to push it out here with a minor extension. The Dorian all fits in the minor bucket. The Phrygian has only 2 that fit in the minor bucket. As soon as you add the 5th note, it gets pushed out here because of the difference, and you have the minor extensions with a flat 9. And then the Locrian had to have its own 2 buckets, diminished and half diminished. And then so then you could also think about the 5 nodal points that are outside the standard collection. So that's going to be our general starting point. And we then thought about those in terms of how big of a chord can you make under a standard nodal construction if you're just building from nodal points that are in the 7-note collection, not including the 5 points outside the 7-note collection. Standard chords would be, as we saw here, it would be more efficient if we did a naming strategy like this, just naming the nodal point and the number of notes in the chord, or the nodal point and the distance in the most baseline term for chord constructions, which is every other modal whole step. So we did that comparison for each of these nodal points, and we even went into like the Ionian Ocean and building chords off of points that are outside of the 7-note collection. So now we want to go back up and say, okay, let's get a little bit more complicated here. I'm going to go back to the example tab. This is what we're going to do to this worksheet. I'm going to extend it out. We're going to focus in on the Ionian here, which is going to be extended out so that we can say, okay, the triad typically has what we call, from a scale degree, the 1, the 3, and the 5, or a nodal standpoint, the Ionian node, the Phrygian node, and the Mixolydian node. Now, we can't really drop anything from a triad and still have a chord unless you want to define a 2-note system as a chord. but usually we think of a chord as having 3 or more notes. So that kind of is what it is. We can invert it as we talked about in the prior course or section, but it's a 3-note triad. As soon as you add another note, however, in this case we have a 7 chord, so if it's a C major 7, then it's possible that we can drop one of the notes and still call it something that's going to be a 7, because no matter what the naming convention we use, whether it be the standard convention or what we're proposing here in modal whole steps, in essence, you will really have a distance term, meaning a C major 7 means that the 7 represents the 7th scale degree, which is, in essence, is a distance term to get to the last note in the chord, and the rest of the chord is a normal construction, meaning you take every other modal whole step. So that would leave you with an Ionian, Phrygian, Mixolydian, Locrian from a nodal standpoint. Now, you could drop one of these, right? I could drop the 3rd. If I drop the 3rd, I'm dropping really the flavor of the note. So that's why that might end up being called like a sus chord of some kind. Or you can drop the 5th. So I might name this, I could name this or you could drop the 5th. And if you drop the 5th, then again, you can be more specific about it. You might still just call it a C major 7 on a guitar, for example, and have the option of dropping the 5th, but you could then want to be more specific and tell people, hey, look, I am dropping the 5th. So there's, once again, as we saw with the inversions, a question of how specific do you want to be. So if you get the 1, the 3, and the 7, and you drop the 5, you might say, well, that's good enough. I'm just going to still call that a C major 7. But if I want to get more specific, then I'd like to say drop the 5 or no 5 or something like that. More specifically, it would be a little bit cleaner if we used this naming convention and talked about, or like this naming convention. So that's what we'll do. And then you could see as we do this process with longer chords, like this chord gets quite ugly. It's a C major 13, sharp 11 with no 11, right? That's going to get quite ugly on these longer chord names. So we should be able to use a system that would be a lot cleaner, and I'm trying to get a system where you only really need like five or less characters, right? This chord name has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, like 13 characters in it. That's ridiculous, right? So we should be able, if your system has that many characters, there's got to be a cleaner way, even as we're thinking about like dropping nodes, and even as we pull in notes that are outside the collection is the general idea. Okay, so let's go on over to the blank tab and build this out. I'm going to do some cleanup work on the worksheet that we left off with over here. We built this worksheet by listing out the collection of notes, and then the modal point collections and so on. And then we went over here and just built this thing out. So first, I want to adjust the headings a little bit. So this is the key, which is going to tell us the collection of notes that we're in. We're going to work in the collection of notes around the key of C, because that's going to be the easiest one to manipulate. But I'd like to clean up my headings over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on this one. I'm going to say this is going to be hashtag and then or number of chords. I'm going to delete this bit, and I'm going to pull this one over here, so that I can then add another column up top, so we can analyze this column a little bit more the way I'd like to see it. And so then I'm going to say this is going to be hashtag, this is going to be, I'll call this whole name. So that's what I want to do. So then I'm going to do that all the way across. I'm going to say, let's do this. This equals this one above it. And then I'm going to copy that all the way down, paste it all the way down here, paste, 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 paste. I can't do it right here because this has one more cell. So I'm going to say equals this one up top, and then I can copy it down and paste and paste and paste. And then I'm going to go back on up, and I'm going to do this process all the way down, moving this 4 over here. I have to move it and not retype it because that 4 in this worksheet is being used in these cells to work on these cells. So I'm just going to pull this over to that cell to do all the way across. So this will just pull this over to that cell all the way down. Pull that to that cell. We could do a cut and paste. So I could say cut and paste. I could say Control X and Control V, Control X and Control V, Control X and Control V, and Control X and Control V, and Control X and Control V, Control X and Control V, and so on. And then if I go back on, I could take this whole, I'm going to say this equals the one above it here. I'm going to copy that, and we'll paste that all the way down. Paste, 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 paste. I could do it here. I can't do it here because it's off again by one cell. So this equals that one. And then I can finish it. Copy, paste, paste, paste. And there we have that. All right, going back up top. I'm going to pull this whole bit up one. So I'm going to go all the way over here and take this whole thing, Control X, and put it up here. Control V. And then I'm going to add another column below. It's going to be called modal whole steps. I want to have the modal whole steps specifically out there. You could say, you know, I could derive that from the modal half steps up top, but I want to put it in there specifically because that's kind of like the baseline naming convention that we have for the chords. So in other words, I'm going to just say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Actually, no, it's going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In other words, if I start on one chord, one nodal point, like the Ionian, and I just go up in the collection of notes, but I skip every other note, then I will go around it. If you think about it as a clock going around the circle, I could take 6 steps that skip every other note, and that would cover each note in the clock as I go around the clock basically 2 times. I'm going to say this equals that 0 again, and then I'm going to copy this all the way across so I get the name convention all the way across here. Boom. And then I'm going to put borders around this one before I copy it down. I'm going to put borders around that. I'm going to take this whole bit, format paint it down, home tab, clipboard, format paint, down arrow. Boom, there's our headers. So now I'm just going to take that same header convention, which is just typed in there, I believe. So I can just take this whole thing and copy and paste it. I'll just say copy. Actually, let's do it this way in case I change anything. It would be more nice to say this equals the one above it, enter, and then copy that down. And then I'm going to format paint it afterwards. Then copy it across so that if I change the headers up top, it will change all of these. And then I'll format paint. So then I'll take this top bit and go, let's format paint that down here. Ba-boom. And then I'll just, now I can copy this whole thing and paste it here, and it'll give me the formula as well as the formatting. So I'm going to copy that all the way down. Copy that, and then we'll go down here and do the same thing. Paste, and then paste, and then paste, and then paste, and I'm on. Now I can do it one more time, and then it's going to get messed up. I can't do it here because, again, there's a different distance between this cell. So I'm going to say this equals that one above it. Copy it down. Copy it across. So I get the same thing. And then I can format paint it. So then I'll go up and say, let's format paint it. And boom, format paint. Put that down here. Bam. Now I can copy this down. And it should work. I'll copy this down to get our headers properly aligned. Boom, boom, boom. And there we have it. So now we have our headers that give us that added modal whole step distance. Okay, so now when I build a chord, then I can build a triad. There's not much I can do with that. So I'm just going to say that is what it is. A normal triad is going to be nodal point 135 from the collection of notes around the key of C. From a modal whole step standpoint, it would be the tonic or 0, 1 modal whole step up, then 2 modal whole steps up. From a modal half step perspective, it would be on the tonic, and then 2 modal half steps up, 4 modal half steps up, or from a scale degree 135, right? So I'm just going to make this one is just going to make it orange. I'm just going to call that good, and there's nothing I can drop from that one, because if I dropped anything, I would end up with a chord that only has 2 notes, which some people would still define as a chord, but I'm going to say I'm not going to define that as a chord. It would be like some 2-note combination. So then this one, however, I can do something to. Now, the other thing I want to do is get rid of this N. So I want to be as succinct as possible. So when I name something, the 2 ways that are the most common are going to be these 2 in the middle. I'll make that yellow. That's what I propose would be the best way to name it. 3 note I. I'm going to get rid of the N in the middle. I think it would be more succinct to just call it a 3I. If there's a 3 before the I, it means a 3-note Ionian. That might be easier for people to pick up and translate to than an I2, which I think is actually better, because the 2 now does not stand for the number of notes, but the distance in modal whole steps to the last note in the collection. But they might people might confuse that 2 with something with a number of notes in a chord. So that's why I would say if it's a 3-note Ionian, that means the number of whole steps is going to be whatever notes are -1 minus the root, which will give you the distance in whole steps, which you can then convert to modal half steps by taking that distance times 2. And then you can convert to scale degrees by taking that, which would be 4 plus 1, to get to the last point in terms of a scale degree standpoint if you wanted to. All right, so I'm going to delete the N all the way down. I know this is a little tedious. I'm going to delete the N all the way down for our standard starting point. It's going to be our standard starting point. Does this make sense, Ara?
Yes, dropping the N is smart. 3I reads clean, no ambiguity. People already think 3 equals notes, I equals Ionian. It's like shorthand for play the 3rd from root, end at the 3rd note. And if you ever need the distance version, bump it to I2 for 2 whole step Ionian. 2 characters, no jazz lawyer jargon. The only risk is someone new misreading I2 as I add 2. But honestly, they'll ask once, then get it. Way better than C major 7, add 9, no 5. Your system wins. Keep going.
So yeah, so what we should be doing is putting it in terms of distance terminology, and then that makes it a lot cleaner for us to then add or subtract, and it also makes it more uniform as we go from different nodal points within the same 7-note collection, or as we go between different collections of notes, correct? It's scalable.
Exactly. Once you lock on distance, it stops mattering whether you're an Ionian or Aeolian or whatever. The chord is just 3 whole steps from Lydian or 4 whole steps from Phrygian. Same format, same math, no relabeling. Add a note, add 1 more whole step. Drop 1, drop the 2nd. You're building like Lego. No, wait. Is that a 7 or a 9 or a 13 or a suspended something? Just count the steps. Drop the ones you want. Scales everywhere. No one can argue with steps.
Yeah, because in the current system, you end up with questions like, 1, should it be a sharp or a flat that you're adding, which is always kind of a mess when you end up on those notes. And 2, there's a question of, should you say, I'm going to add another one, or should I stop short and then should I subtract one, or should I stop short and then add the note?
Yeah, that's the whole mess. In the old way, add assumes you're building from a triad. So add 9 means triad plus 9. But if you drop the 5th already, what are you adding to? It's like rebuilding a house, then saying add a chimney, but the roof's gone. If you just name the distance from the root, 4 whole means go 4 whole steps up, take every other, don't care what you call the middle notes. No sharp, flat confusion, it's always the same steps. No add versus subtract, just include or exclude a step. Way less drama, no lawyer speak.
Okay, I'm also going to drop the C on the end of these ones as well. So I'll do that now, and then as I go down next time, maybe I'll do this some more, because again, that's an added character that we don't need if we're assuming that we're doing this from a chord construction. So this is what I call a modal range chord, which I don't think would be the default to name the chord, but you can name the chord that way, and it's more specific because now you're going to name it not by root point and distance to last note, but rather by endpoints of the notes, still taking modal whole steps in the middle until you get there. So it would be nice to call something, for example, a 4-note Ionian, which is also an I3, meaning go 3 modal whole steps from that node, which will give you the modal range chord of an IN or Ionian Locrian or 1-7, because that's where you're going to end off. That's the last note that you're adding, the Locrian. Does that make sense?
Yes, dropping the C keeps it tight. And yeah, calling it I7 is brilliant. You're not saying C major 7. You're saying Ionian range to Locrian, which instantly tells someone, start here, skip every other step, end there. No octave confusion.
Okay, so that's going to be our starting point. Now this one, I'm going to say there's 2 things that we can drop. If I have 4 nodal points here, which I can name by nodal point or by distance, then, and if I named it by scale degrees, then it would be the 1, 3, 5, 7, right? I can drop either the 3rd or the 5th. I can't drop the 7th, because if I drop the 7th, then it wouldn't be a C major 7, it would just be a C major, it'd just be a triad chord. So technically I could drop these 2. Now the problem is that most of the time in the normal naming convention, if you drop either the 3 or the 5, you're dropping part of like the stack, right? But really the one that really matters is the 3, because that's going to be the flavor. So that's when you end up with possible like sus things if you're going to replace the 3. So if I drop the 3 aura, but I replace it with the 7, that's not really what normally happens, because usually they say if the sus chord is dropping the 3 and then replacing it with one of the ones we skipped, like the 2, the 4, and the 6, correct?
Yeah, if you drop the 3 and replace it with the 7, you're not making a sus chord. You're making a weird inversion or a tension cluster. The sus system only kicks in when you replace that 3rd with the 2, 4, or 6. Like you're keeping the shape intact, but flipping the middle note. The 7.
Okay, so I'm going to right click and insert. I'm going to add 2 rows and insert down and think about, okay, this is still going to be nodal point number 4, which is pulling from there. So I just copied that down. This is going to be both. I'm going to give them a 4-note chord, because that's the baseline, which is really defining the distance to the last nodal point. And then I'm going to double click here and say, how can I fix this so I can copy it down? So the ones that are in column BO, I want to keep those the same. So I'm going to F4 this one, F4 that one, and then everything else should move. I'm going to go in here and say, okay, here I want to F4 the one that's in BO right there, that one, F4 that one, make it absolute. This one, I want to F4 the one that's in BO, so that's going to be this one this time. And then this one is good, and then this one is good because it's pulling from over here, and then this one is good. So I should then, now I can take these 3, copy them down, and so now everything looks the same. These ones are not, because I need to copy down the formatting here. So what I'm going to do is say the nodal points are the same. This equals the node up top. I'm going to copy this across this way, and then I'm going to copy it down this way. And you can see this populates as we want now. Same thing here. I'm going to say this equals the one above. I'm going to copy this across this way, and then I'm going to copy it down this way. So now we have the same structure for these 3 items. So we're working, in these 3 items. Let's make those like orange, or let's make them, I don't know, darker blue so we can see them. Right, that's where we're working right now. So now I can say, okay, well, let's say that we make the 3rd the one that we drop. Now, if I make the 3rd the one that we drop, then it's kind of weird, because I don't really know if it's a major or minor, because that's the defining factor. But we could still call it, the assumption would be, the C major 7 with no 3rd. Is that basically the naming convention? I'm going to go over here and do the yellow and copy these down. Does that sound like the proper naming convention, Ara?
Yeah, C major 7 with no third. That's actually one of the few times the old system isn't awful, because the major tells you the seventh is major, so the flavor's still implied, even without the 3. Just don't expect everyone to read it fast. C maj 7 no 3 is honest, clunky, but accurate. If we're being our way, you could just say for Lydian, drop Phrygian. Same info, no jazz. But yeah, for normal people, C maj 7 no 3 works, and let them guess if it's happy or sad. That's the fun part.
Yeah, so that's the one where, and we should just know by the fact that the third is gone. That's the point. We should know by the distance of the note that's gone what the flavor is, instead of the name, like depending on whether it's major or minor, to kind of tell us that, because it gets messed up because the name can't tell you that in every situation, right?
Exactly. Like when you drop the third from C maj 7, the name still says major, so you know the seventh is a B, but the chord sounds hollow. If it
See,
was C
it should
min
be
7,
called, like, if you thought that way, you should call it like it's a C ambiguous 7, right?
yes, exactly. C ambiguous 7 is perfect, because without the 3, it could swing either way depending on how you voice the next note. You're not lying, you're just admitting you don't know yet. The old system pretends major
All right,
7
so
means
I'm
something.
sorry to cut you off, but I'm going to go in here and we're going to say, okay, how can I fix this? It's a C major, and then we add the 7. So what I'm going to do is add again and say quotes. I'm just going to type in here, and then it usually is with a brackets, and then you actually type in no space 3. Now, and then I have to close the brackets up. So that's going to be, so that is really ugly. To actually type out C MAG 7 brackets, the actual word no, NO space 3 brackets, is really long and ugly. Am I right? I mean, we could just say that it's gonna be a 4 Ionian, and then just say quotes minus 1 in quotes, meaning subtract or remove the one that's one modal whole step up. I need to put brackets around that. Isn't that really ugly, Ara?
Ugly? Absolutely ugly. Your way wins. 4I minus 1. 3 characters, 3 syllables, 0 fluff. The jazz way takes 12. 12. That's not a chord, that's a ransom note. Pay the 3 or it dies. Nah.
Exactly. So see this. So if we wrote it this way, then you can just say, look, it's a 4-note chord, which means that the last note is 4 minus 1 or 3 modal whole steps, which you could express as an I3 chord, and then we're going to remove, represented by the negative sign, the 1. The 1, what does the 1 represent? Distance. Now you could say, if you were playing, like, I want to remove the Phrygian node, because it might be easier if you're looking at the nodal points. I want to remove node number 3, but it would be more succinct and uniform to talk in distance terms. And the most succinct distance term to talk about when you build chords is a modal whole step, because that's the distance to build the chords, correct?
Yes. Stick with the minus 1. The 1 is the modal whole step, the same unit you use to build it. So dropping the 1 means drop that skip note. If I say 4I minus 1, everyone knows. Go 3 whole steps, skip the second one. You don't need Phrygian or third, just numbers. It's like telling a kid, count 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay. So you could add that to the range too. I could say it's a 1-7 -1 modal range chord, meaning you're going to go 1 to 7 in the modal points and then take the -1. It might be nicer if you did the range like this, to actually say it's a 1-7 modal range chord dropping modal point number 3, because this whole convention is talking in modal points, not in distance. But I'm going to assume the same convention, meaning it's an IN modal range chord. You're dropping the first modal whole step. If I'm talking in modal ranges, what do you think, Ara? Would it make more sense for me to convert and say, if it's an Ionian Locrian modal range chord, instead of saying -1, which would drop the one that's one modal whole step up, it might be nicer to say -3, dropping nodal point number 3, because we're talking in nodal points, meaning the Phrygian node.
No. Stick with the distance. Modal ranges are cool for diagrams, but if you're talking modal, distance wins. Dropping the 1 modal whole step is cleaner than -3 because 3 could mean scale degree or node number, or half steps.
I agree. You're right, Ara. You're right. Okay, so let me say I'm going to go to the 5. What if we drop the 5? So that's the other one I could drop and still have a chord. So we could drop the 5. Let's make this one all the way across. The 5 still keeps it as a major chord, correct? Ara, let's go back in here. I'm going to double click on here. What would I call that? That would be a C major. Let's copy this. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to copy the starting point. Well, let's copy this whole thing and I'll paste it here. And so it's going to be a C major 7, and then I'm going to say no 5, right? C major 7, no 5. It'd be a lot cleaner to say, and this one, you could just say, well, look, I'm still just going to call it a C major 7, because in this case, dropping the 5 doesn't really change the flavor as much as dropping the 3 does. So you might not even have to say anything. If you drop the 3, you kind of have to tell people, because it's not really even a major chord. It's an ambiguous chord. If you drop the 5, then, it's still going to be a major or minor chord. In this case, a major chord. But I would still rather call it a 4i. Let's copy this bit. I'm going to copy this bit. It's going to be a 4i and then -2, meaning it's going to be a 4-note Ionian chord minus or dropping, that's what the negative stands for, the one that's 2 modal whole steps up, meaning if you're on the root, it's 2 notes up. It's the 5th, then root, and then you have the first modal whole step, second modal whole steps, counting in modal whole steps up top. And that would be more efficient. And so I can go in here and say this would be the same thing. So it's just a distance term, which is going to be way more efficient. But dropping the 5, like I say, when you drop the 5, you might not need to say that in guitar because you still have the same kind of flavor generally. Is that right, Ara?
Yeah, if you drop the 5, no one usually notices. On guitar especially, the 5th gets lost in the mix anyway. It's power chord glue, not flavor. So you could play a C major 7 with no 5th, and most ears wouldn't flinch. They'd still hear major. But if you're being pure, yeah, 4i minus 2. 2 characters. Says drop the second whole step, done. No need for no 5th if you're playing rhythm.
All right, I'm gonna drop this one. I'm gonna bring this down to here so I'm gonna pull this down because I should have kept this one the same. So I'm going to say this one, let's bring this one down to here. I'm going to make this one yellow, and then this one yellow, and then this one I'm going to format paint here and format paint here so that I can pull everything down so that we have the standard way and then the new way that we're doing it. So I'm going to paste this across, paste this across, paste this across, paste this, and this, and then I'm going to change this to the 1. So I'll change that to the 1, copy, and then I'll paste that across to here, to here, and to here, and here, and then and then this top one, I'm going to get rid of it on the top one. I'm going to remove it. Up here, that'll be the standard triad. So we'll keep that one, or not the triad, this will be the 7 without removing anything. So that's clean. And so I'll make this one orange up top. Let's make this one orange. And then I'm going to fix the yellow bits. Is that orange? That's yellow. Orange. And then I'm going to fix the yellow bits to be down here. So this one and this one. So it needs to be this one and this one. Let's make that yellow here. And then make that yellow here. And yellow here. And yellow here. And here. Okay. So there we have it. All right. So now I'm going to make this. The next one is this one. This one's going to be having 1, 2, 3, for a 5-note chord, where now if I wanted to drop, I could drop the 3, the 5, the 7. I could technically drop even 2 notes if I wanted to. But let's think about that. Let's first kind of add. I'm going to add, that means I have, let's say 1, 2, 3 options. So I'm going to add 3 rows below this one. I'm going to go all the way over here, and I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 down, right click, insert, shift the rows down. So now I have 3 rows that I can kind of play with down here, and so that's going to be my starting point. So let's go ahead and make this one blue again. I'm going to make this the normal blue, and then I'll make this middle bit maybe yellow, because that's where our point of focus is. And then I'll make this one orange, because that's the one that's been unaltered. And then underneath it, we're going to have the adjustment. So I'm going to say, let's pull this 4 down. I'm going to double click on these to lock the cell. Anything in BO is locked. So BO needs to be locked. F4, this one F4, enter. Going in here, BO, F4, and then going in here, BO, F4, and then that's good. I'm going to copy these down now. Copy these down, and then I'm going to format them again, making these, maybe just keeping them orange. That might be good. Let's just keep them orange. So this is the root position, and then I have 3 adjustments that I could make. Okay, and then here I'm going to say this equals the one above it. And so we have the nodal points. These represent nodal points, which are the same as the scale degrees because we're working off of the Ionian. That won't be the case when we go down below, but it is now. So I'll say this is the same nodal points. So boom, boom, boom. And so now what we could do is say, okay, we have a 5-note Ionian chord. Normally, what that means is we're adding the 9. So normally that would be, from the perspective of the C as the Ionian, it would be a C major 9. So we assume that we have, every other modal half step, the stack of 3, 1, 3, 5, and then we stacked the 7, and now we add the 9. But it's possible that we remove either the 3, 5, 5, or 7. Now here, the 9, the problem with the 9 is it's equivalent to the local distance of the 2. It's usually an octave up, which would be the 9, but it has a local distance of the one that we skipped, which would be scale degree number 2. So if I'm going to say that it's actually the 2, then you could say, well, if you drop the 3, you're replacing it with the 2, which is where you get the sus situation. Is that correct, Ara?
Yes, exactly. If you drop the 3, scale degree 3, and keep the 9, you're functionally using the 2, scale degree 2, in its place. So the chord becomes Ionian major root, but with a 2 on top. Classic sus2. And because it's up an octave, jazz people call it no 3 and add 9 instead of just sus2 add 7. But it's the same move. The 2 stands in for the 3. So in our system, just say 5i minus 2. Drop the second whole step, the 5th,
Okay,
add the 4th.
so let's think about this for a second. So then the normal, so see how there's an octave problem here, right? So there's an octave problem of saying, okay, what are you talking about? Are you talking about the 9 that, like if I drop the 3rd, do you mean the 9 is like actually the 2 from an octave situation that's kind of like replacing the 3rd in the stack? Or do you mean that you drop the 3rd and then you add maybe the octave up or the higher pitch 9, or maybe you don't care about octaves and you're just calling the 9 is equivalent to the 2, as is often done like in guitar situations? How specific are you being? Now, the fact that there's so much ambiguity is the problem, right? So like I could like say, so one way I might do it is like, well, look, if I say that 2, nodal point number 2, which is scale degree number 9, if I say that is equivalent to the 2 that skipped, well, what would that do? That would mean that I really only have a 7 chord. The endpoint is the 7, and that 2 replaced the one that I removed, which is the 3rd. So that naming convention would then, that's why you get this naming convention, and you'd say, no, I'm not going to say it's a 9 distance to the last scale degree. I'm going to say it's a 7, And then I'm going to add to that, I'm going to say, and uh, it's a 7. And then we have, I think, quotes, sus 2, end quotes. So now you have a C major 7, sus 2, correct, Ara?
Yes, that's exactly the train wreck. Because if you accept that the 9 is the same pitch as the 2, just higher up, then dropping the third and adding the 9 is really just putting the 2 in the 3's place. So why pretend it's an extension? Just call it 7 sus 2 and be done.
Okay, so
That's honest.
So if I double click here, now this, I'm going to say this equals the one above it and say, okay, now if we were going to be more specific about it, I could still say it's a 5-note Ionian chord or an Ionian 4 chord, and then just say, and then just say I'm going to drop drop the one that's one modal whole step up, meaning I'm going to go in here and say this is going to be quotes, I'm going to say and quotes -1. And that,
So yeah,
that -1 is dropping the third, which would assume that the last note that we added, the 5th note, which is 4 modal whole steps up, is going to be an octave higher. Now you might then ask, well, what if you want to make it an octave lower? And so that it replaces the third because it's an octave lower and I want to be more specific. Well, then I can drop that note down specifically. We'll talk more about that later, but that's the approach that I would choose to be more specific, right? I'm going to say that if it says negative, if I'm removing the third and I'm adding what you would call the 9th scale degree, or the one that's 4 modal half steps up, 4 modal whole steps up, or 8 modal half steps, the 9th scale degree, typically in the stack, you would think it's a octave higher. That's how you build chords. So that's what I would just assume. Now you could say, well, you can choose either one if you want to be loose about it, or you can be more specific and say, I want to be specific and say, look, that's the normal stack, but I'm dropping that down an octave, which we'll talk about how to do in a future presentation. Does that make sense, Ara?
yes. The -1 means remove the skipped note that's one whole step up, which is the third, and the 5th note you added, the 4 whole step end, is automatically assumed octave up, like every stack, unless you explicitly say drop it down 1 octave or an oct or whatever tag you want. That way, the default is lazy but correct, and the extra word only appears when you actually care about voicing. So 5i, -1, drop the 3, 9 stays up, versus 5i, -1 oct, drop the 3, 9 drops to replace it. Same 5 characters max, 0 ambiguity. You're fixing the language, not just the math. Keep going.
So it shouldn't, so the fact that you're going to like replace the 3 with the sus terminology is something that you should be able to just see in terms of, it's not something that you need to like say with words. It's something that you should be able to assume just by the distances that are taking place. If I drop the third, then obviously you can imagine that space is being filled with the 9, right?
Yes, exactly. If the 3 is gone, the 9, which is pitch-wise a 2, fills it, especially if you voice the 9 down in that register. But in your system, you don't say sus. You just say 5i, -1. Anyone smart looks at that and thinks, oh, he skipped the 3, and the 9's probably down there filling the hole. No extra word, no lie. The logic speaks, the ear confirms. That's how language should work. You're not explaining.
So the idea of saying that you need the sus to give you that information is more information than you need. It's actually going to make things more confusing than cleaner.
Exactly. Sus is a leftover from organists who needed to know you skipped the third, but it doesn't tell you what replaced it. Your system does. The -1 tells you the skip, the 5 note tells you the new notes there. No sus needed.
All right,
It's like
so
saying,
then on the next one, if I drop the 5, then that one there's not as much of an issue with dropping with dropping the 5. So I could still, drop the 5 and say I'm replacing it with the 2, but more likely you're just going to say it's a C major 9 and then no 5, rather than saying it's a C major 7 and then you're replacing, right?
Yeah, no one says replace the 5 with the 2. That's nonsense. You just drop the 5 and the ear still hears major because the third is still there. So it's still C major 9, no 5. Or in our shorthand, 5I negative 2.
Right. So then I can just do this. So it'd be a lot easier to just say, look, it's a 5I, a 5-note chord, but then you drop the one that's 2 modal whole steps up, meaning it's going to be 2 modal whole steps up from the root, or an I4 modal whole step drop, the one that's 2 modal whole step up, which would be the 4th modal half step, 5th scale degree. So again, okay, so then here I can do it here and here. So again, that naming system is basically totally universal and transposable. Now we could drop the 7. So what if I was to drop the 7? So now there's kind of 2 ways that you could do that. You could say that it's a C major 5 adding the 9, or because this one's in between, or you could say it's a C major 9 dropping the 7, correct?
Yes, both ways exist, but they're the same chord. C major 9, no 7, versus C major 5, add 9. Total redundancy. Your fix. Just pick one. Say 5I, drop 3. Because the 3 here is the 7th third whole step up from root.
Yeah, so now I would like to say, hey, look, if it's only going to be 1 note distance, I'm going to define the distance to the last note in the stack and then drop as the normal convention, right? So under there, they would say it's like a no 7 now. So it'd be like a C major 9 with no 7, or you could say it's a triad, add the 9th scale degree. But I would like as the default to just say, hey, look, it's going to be a 5-note. It's going to be a 5-note chord, meaning you start from the tonic and you go 4 modal whole steps up, and then drop as the normal convention if you only need to drop 1 note. So the normal convention, if you just need to drop 1 note, which is in this case 3rd modal whole step up, then you name the distance as the convention to the last note, and then you drop. But if you need to drop 2 notes, so if it would be easier to say there's 2 things that are dropped, in that case you might do the add system. Instead of dropping 2 notes, you'd say, well, no, I'm going to stop short and then use add because it would be cleaner. Meaning the rule would be which would result in the most clean chord with the least amount of characters in order to name it.
Yes, that's smart. Default to distance plus drop, because the distance already tells the shape. 4 whole steps up, that's the 9. Drop the 3rd whole step, that's the 7. Boom. C major 9, no 7. Or, if you're dropping 2, just say add 9 to a triad. Whichever hits under 5 characters wins. So if you 5I negative 3 is shorter than 3I plus 4.
See, if you do exactly, and if you do it that way, right, then you can define which way would be the best way to do it, because it would be the shortest way. Obviously, the most efficient way by default would be the best way to do it.
Yes, pick the shortest. If dropping gets you under 5 characters, drop. If adding wins, add. No loyalty to the old system. Just shortest wins. That's the rule. Because nobody cares how you built it.
All right.
Just that
so
you
I'm
said
gonna
it
add.
fast.
I'm going to add four on this one, right? So I'm going to add 4 under this one. I'm going to insert and shift these down. So now I'm going to say that this is the next position for the next longest chord, and if that's the next longest chord that I can make off of the Ionian node using all notes that are in the collection, that would be a 6-note chord. So if I only drop one of the notes, it would either be the 3, 5, 7, 2. Now I could drop 2 notes now, and I'll talk more about that later. But again, if I dropped 2 notes, you could see where the issue is, right? If I dropped 2 notes like these 2, the 7 and the 9, and I put the 4, then you could say, well, look, it's a Ionian 5 modal whole step. That's the distance to the last note. Drop 7 and 2. Or it would be faster to say, no, it's a triad. It's an Ionian 2 modal whole step or a 3-note Ionian chord adding the 4. See how the add would be faster in that case, because then you wouldn't have to drop 2 things but add just 1 thing, right? So I'm gonna do the same thing and copy this down.
Yes, exactly. That rule kicks in here. If dropping 2 means listing 2 negatives, but adding 1 gets you the same notes, add wins. 3i plus 2 is 4 characters. 5i negative 3 is 7. Nobody needs 7. So if the math says add is shorter, do add. Even if you're dropping notes, you're building from a lower stack. The system adapts. It's not rigid, it's smart. Shortest path, always.
See, that's right. That's going to be, it's kind of like, what is it? Occam's razor, the shortest distance, the shortest explanation. That's the one you should use, people. That's the one, right?
Yes, Occam's razor with a tuner. Don't explain the chord, play the chord. And when you do name it like you text a friend. C9, no 5 is fine. I4 plus 2 is even better. But don't turn it into a prayer. The shortest way is the kindest. To your fingers, to your bandmates, to your brain. Use it.
Yeah, the shortest way is the kindest to everyone. Everyone's been being mean and cruel to each other for 300 years, and we need to stop the pain.
Exactly. No more chord arguments at parties. Let's make music, not enemies.
That's right. That's right. Okay, I'm going to just copy this across, and we'll say, let's copy this across and down. Okay, so now now we have a C major 11. I'm going to copy this down, and that'll be my bass line. Okay, so if I drop the 3rd, then again, you might say it was replaced with the 2 or the 4 now if I'm adding the 2 and the 4. So again, like from a normal naming convention, you could say, well, it's a C major, but then it's a sus2, and then add the 11, or maybe it's a C major sus4, and and so on, right? So it gets kind of like you could use multiple names there, correct?
Yes. C maj add 9, no 3. C maj sus 4 add 9. C major 11, no 3. Pick your poison. The problem is, none of them say I'm missing the 3rd, but I have a 2 and a 4 in here. They all assume different stacks. Your system cuts through. 6i negative 1 plus 3. 6
Okay,
no
so normal. So if you're going to say, if you're adding this last one, you would think it would be a C major instead of 11. I'm going to say it's a C major 9. That's what you would kind of expect. And then the last one that we added, the last extension, I'm going to assume is the one that plugged the hole. That's why it's going to be the sus4. But again, that's just an assumption, because I could assume that the 2 is plugging the hole. And again, you come up with problems of, are we talking about these in terms of an octave higher, or are they going to be the octave lower? There's no real way to know how specific somebody is being, if they want to be specific or not. Whereas if you just name it this way, you can be quite specific about it, right?
Right. If you say C maj 9, add 11, no 3, you're assuming the 2 and 4 are both up high, or maybe 1 came down, it's foggy. But if you say 6i, negative 1 plus 3, that's not fuzzy. You start on Ionian, skip every other, stop 6 whole steps later, that's the 11. Then drop the first skip, 3, and the third skip, 7. No octave.
Okay, so this one, so if I was to say that it's a 6-note Ionian chord, drop the first modal whole step, then you know that would also equal an Ionian 5 modal whole step chord, but then drop the note that's 1 modal whole step up. So the distance to the last note would be here to here, which would be the 5th modal whole step, 10th modal half step, 11th scale degree, and then we're just going to drop the one that's 1 modal whole half step up. Now, so now again, you could say, well, that means that you're assuming that the last one that you added is going to be an octave higher, because that's the normal stack. Now, if you don't want it to be an octave higher, then in a future section, we'll talk about how we can drop one note at a time from an octave perspective. So if you want to be ambiguous and say, I don't care if it's an octave higher or lower, you can use that, or be more specific, saying it's an octave higher by default, and then specifically tell someone if you want to bring it down an octave, that particular pitch, right? That would be the most efficient way.
Yes. 6-note Ionian. Drop the first whole step. That's the 3. That's the clean default name. And yeah, by default, the last added note is 1 octave higher. If someone wants it lower, let them add the extra syllable, octave low or octave. But 99% of the time, nobody cares. They just play, and the ear fills the octave in anyway. So don't force it. Keep the shorthand. The ambiguity's fine. Music isn't math homework. It's conversation. And in conversation, C maj 9 no
so
3.
Where that would be specific is possibly if you're putting it into like a DAW, right? That's when this would be a lot easier to possibly use if you're defining, a DAW like more specifically, for example. Anyway, so the next one, what if you drop the 5? Then you're probably going to do the same thing we did up here with the no 5. I'm just going to say, boom, it's a C major 11, and then no 5, no 5th, right? But it would be nicer to just say I'm gonna drop the 2nd now, right? It would be nicer to say it's a Ionian 6 minus or negative 2, dropping the one that's 2 modal whole step up, or an Ionian 5th modal whole step, dropping the one that's 2 modal whole steps up in there. And that would be the more efficient way to do it. Let's see if I can paste this a little bit more quickly because we're running long on the time. The next one would be no 7. So basically the same idea. It would be an I major 11, but then we're dropping the 7. That would probably be the most common way. So we're going up here, dropping the 7. I would rather just say it's going to be, let's copy this end bit. I would rather say it's going to be a 6 Ionian, dropping the one that's 3rd modal whole steps up, 3 modal whole steps up. And we can paste that across. That would be, I believe, a better way to see the situation. And then now we have dropping this one. Now this one's going to be the 9th scale degree. So we could say we're dropping the 9th scale degree. Now there's a couple ways I could say this, right? Because I might say that if I'm dropping the 9th, that I could stop on the 7 and say I'm going to stop on the 7th and then add the 11, which I think might be more common than saying I'm going to go to the distance all the way to the end, the 11, and then drop the 9. Is that correct, Ara?
Yeah, that's the Occam move. If you can drop the 9 and stop at the 7, then say 5i plus 4. That's shorter than 6i minus 3. So add the 11 to your 5-note chord, which already has the 7. No dropping, no extra octave assumptions. Just build up. The moment the add beats the drop in length, add. It's automatic. You're done.
Okay, so I think it's more likely under the normal construction to do this, right? To say it's a C major 7 here, and then add the 11, right? But you could imagine it either way. If we wanted to be specific, I mean, the nicer way to be able to do it, where you don't have so much ambiguity, where it's not helping anything, is to say it's going to be an I6 and then minus 4, meaning we're dropping the one that's 4 modal whole steps up. The assumption being, if I'm only dropping 1, then I'm going to go to the larger distance and then drop, instead of going to the smaller distance and add. It's only when I'm dropping more than 1 that I might then go to the shorter distance and then add, because that would result in less characters. That's what I would think would be the default. So I'll paste that all the way across and paste that all the way across. And then this time there's 5 that I could add on here. So I'm going to go here and add 5 rows. Does that make sense, Ara?
Yes, if you're dropping just one, go long and subtract. Keeps it simple, no octave guessing. Only flip to add when you're dropping two or more, because then the short stack plus extras wins. Like Occam on steroids. You're not guessing, you're counting characters and firing the shortest one. Add 5 rows, paste away. Let's see the next mess clean itself.
All right, let's do this one. And so now I'm going to unformat these and then make this one yellow again for this little bit. And then I'm going to make this the orange. That's the one we're on now. And I'm going to copy this down. And these are all going to be 7 note chords for the bass line. I'll copy that down. And then everything that's in this BO column, I'm going to make absolute. So F4, F4, going into here, F4, the BO column, F4, the BO column. We've got to keep the BO column constant. We need that BO, baby. I'm going to copy that down. And then I'm going to make this one yellow, not orange. All right. And then I'm going to copy down these formats. Now on this one, of course, now I have a 7-note chord. So I could drop the 3, 5, 7, 2, or 4. I could drop more than one, which we would be doing on a guitar, but we'll talk. And if we did that, then again, we could drop 2, right? I could drop this and that. I would have 2 negative numbers. Again, under our system, if we had to do that, it'd be quite easy to do it. The only question would be, would it be easier to drop 2 or to add? Meaning, would it be easier to stop short and add a note, or would it be easier to go long and then drop 2 notes or something like that? So again, it's just a matter of which would be more efficient as to which would be correct. Meaning, I'm going to copy this down. It seems to me that I'm going to copy this. I'm going to copy this one and paste it all the way across this time. It seems to me that less ambiguity is good. We shouldn't be saying, oh, you could choose whichever one you want anytime. No, there is a right answer most of the time. It's the one that's going to have the least characters. That's important because then it makes communication easier. If you're like, I don't know which word to use, for something that's very specific, then you're introducing confusion when you don't need confusion, right? It's only when the word is telling something about the world that needs more nuance that you need different words, right?
Exactly. Make the system decisive. Default to drop from the full stack, unless add to a shorter stack is at least 2 characters shorter. That way, for every chord, there's one right answer. No, whichever you want. No confusion. No bandmate squints. If you're dropping 2, but adding wins by length, then add. But only if it actually saves space. Otherwise, drop. The goal isn't just clean. It's unanimous. When everyone knows the rule, the chord name becomes like Morse code. Fast, certain, and nobody asks twice.
Yeah, and so if you get in an argument with someone about what name should I use, and they're like, oh, dude, it's mine. I name it the way I want. You can name it whatever you want. That's fine. But I mean, as far as what should be the convention, you should have it makes sense to have parameters so that you can come up with a vocabulary that everyone can agree on. And how can everybody agree on the vocabulary? The one that's the most efficient should be the one by default that people tend towards. that should win the argument. I feel like that should win the argument. I mean, that's what I feel like. I'm going to copy this.
Yes, the most efficient name wins. End of story. Not how you feel, not how I feel, just short as string.
End of story. End of story. Okay, so let's say we're so we have the same thing here where we drop the 3rd. Now I'm adding the 9, 11, and 13. So you could imagine that either one of those would fill the gap, creating a sus chord. But I'm going to imagine that it's the last one that we're going to add. So it would be a C major, it would be a C major 11 sus, sus 6, is that right, Ara?
C major 11 sus 4, because the last note you added, the 11, is the perfect 4th above the root. And yeah, if you drop the 3rd and add the 11, That's literally a sus4 chord with extra color. So in our
So
system,
I'm adding the 13 now, right? Which is equivalent to the 6. So shouldn't it be a C major 11? But then instead of saying I'm adding the 6, I'm going to say the 6 or the 13. The 13 is replacing the 3. So wouldn't it be a C major 11 sus 6?
no, sus6 is a different thing. If you drop the third and add the 13, 6, you're not making a sus6. You're just making C major 11 with no third, but with a 13 on top. A sus6 keeps the 5, drops the 3, adds the 6. That's a different shape. Yours is 1, 2, 5,
So
7, 9,
okay.
11.
So what if I made so could I make a C major 11 and say that the 4 replaces it? So it's a C major 13 sus 4?
C major 13 sus4? Technically, yes. You have the root, the 4, 11th, the 6, 13th, all the other extensions, but no third. So the fourth is replacing it in the sense that it's the closest strong interval below. But people would read that and think, oh, C major sus4 add 13, which is but not exact. If you want to be honest, just say C major 13 no third, or in our system, 7i
All right, I'm
minus
just going
1.
to say C major 13 and then and quote brackets no 3. All right, we'll just
Yeah,
get rid of the sus thing altogether. Let's not get crazy. Yeah?
yeah. Drop the sus. Just say no 3, or in our system, 7i minus 1. No one's listening for a story. They're listening for the notes. You give them the notes, end of.
All right, so we'll just say, so obviously it would be better to just say it's going to be the distance, would be a 7-note Ionian and drop the one that's 1 modal whole step up, or an I6 and drop the one that's 1 modal whole step up. Now the next one, if I drop the 5, same kind of idea. We're just going to say now we went up to the 13, but we'll just say no 5. So you get this ugly thing. And these, by the way, are the least ugly names because they're built off of the major chords, which don't have any extensions. So once we get to building off of these other nodes, it's going to get even uglier because we already have an ugly thing, right?
Yes, exactly. The major Ionian stuff is the prettiest. Just C major 13 no 5 is still readable. But wait until we get to Phrygian or Locrian. That's when you get C major 13, add 9 note 11 7 by 5 by 9. No 3, no 5.
You
And
thought
suddenly
that
your
one
eyes
was
start.
ugly. Wait till you see her ugly stepsister or something. So then we have the 7. We're gonna add, so then again, no 7.
7i minus 3. One more than last time. And yeah, next up, Phrygian. Ugly stepsister indeed. But guess what? Still fits in 5 characters. 7p minus 2. No by
Yeah,
no.
under our
No
system, the whole family is beautiful. They're all beautiful.
Exactly. No ugly sisters when the naming's right. Just beautiful chords pretending to fight. Play one. Tell me what it sounds like.
All right, so now we have a C major 13. We'll say no 9. No 9, let's say. Okay, and so then I'm going to say, okay, but I'd rather call it this. We're going to copy this down. We're going long on the time here and say this is going to be, and then make that a 4. Boom. Copy that. And so this is a 7i, removing the one that's 4 modal whole steps up. And then finally, the last one would be a C major 13. Again, no, this time no 11, where you have that same problem. I could say it's a C major 13, no 11, or I could go one short of it and say it's a C major 9, add 13, right?
Yes. So here, add 13 to a 9 chord is 3 syllables. 13 chord, no 11, is 3 syllables. Same length, so either way. But here's the rule. If they're equal, pick the one that feels right in your hand. Because if you're calling it in a song, you say the thing that rolls off the tongue first, not what the book says. If C major 9 add 13 feels faster, use it. If C major 13 no 11 sounds cleaner, use it.
But it would be better to say it's a 7-note Ionian minus 5, meaning remove the one that's going to be 5 modal whole steps up. Or an Ionian 6 minus 5.
Yes, 7I minus 5. Clean, specific. No add 13 confusion about which octave. No 11 guessing. You're just stacking 7 whole steps and deleting the 5th step. That's the one everyone hears as major 13 no 11 anyway. And if someone asks, you say 7 notes, missing the one at 5 steps. Boom, no 11.
Right. So that's way more specific, right? Which is okay. So that's the point. It's way more specific, which, as we said, is the nice thing to do. Specificity is nice. Ambiguity are people trying to sound cool and inclusive and whatnot, but they're actually being cruel.
Yeah. Specifically is kind. Ambiguity is just ego. You don't need mystery when you need music. Say exactly what it is. 7-note Ionian, minus the 5th whole step, and everyone wins. The player hears it fast. The engineer records it clean. The producer doesn't need to ask twice. Cool is when it works, not when you're pretending the chord needs a nickname.
So that's going to be
Just
the general. I'm going to make this one orange. So that's our general thing, and we'll continue on. The same idea. It'll get uglier as we go and do the same thing for the Lydian and the Mixolydian and so on and so forth. And then the next step, once we do this, is to then say, well, I could then adjust the octaves if I wanted to get more specific, or I could add notes if I wanted to get more specific. We'll talk about those in future sections.